Now we're joined by Richard Conlin, who's running for re-election to City Council. So go ahead with the 2-minute introduction.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I've really appreciated the endorsement and support of the 36th in the past, and would really value it again. I'm running for re-election because I think that I provide a combination of skills, strengths, and commitments that the city needs, and that I really want to put to use again for another 4 years. The thing that, to me, is most important is being able to keep a perspective on the big issues and recognize that the big issues need to be done. So I'm on the South Transit Board. I'm working really hard to get light rail going and make sure that we keep going. We've got 3 lines underway. I worked very hard on the viaduct replacement project, on 520, lots of other big issues like that. And also keep my focus on the things that are important for neighborhoods. I believe that every neighborhood has several things that they're looking for, that they need to have happen, and I want to make sure that they do happen. The South Park Bridge is a really good example of how I work on that. I managed to combine my neighborhood activism with my regional presence. We've struggled for years to try and find a funding package for the South Park Bridge. It's not in Seattle, it's in King County. Dale Constantine's office came to me and asked, I was president at the time, and asked, is there any way Seattle can help us out with that? So I went to my colleagues and got us to pledge $15 million from the city towards that bridge. And that started a cascade of things happening. And by the time it was done, within 2 months, we had the whole $120 million we needed, and the bridge is now getting replaced. I did that because it's a low-income community, a community that needed support, that needed help, and we needed to participate on the regional level. I do things everywhere around the city. In Ballard, I was very involved in the park, getting the property that's right next to the locks as a park, working with Urban Sparks and some of the other folks on that. I put the legislation through to complete the Burke-Gilman Trail. Lots of other things in this neighborhood, and I think we're about out of time, but we really look forward to replying to your questions.
Great, thank you. So now we have our 5 prepared questions that we're asking all candidates. 2-minute answers to each of these. I think we left off with Liz, who did number 1.
What is your strategy for implementing, leveraging, and perhaps improving the incentive program, zoning program to create diverse neighborhoods and assure affordable housing?
Okay, so the incentive zoning program is a complicated program. And one of the things that's really important to understand is it is not the solution for affordable housing. It is a potential solution, and it does provide some things. The tension that we have in the incentive zoning program is between being able to provide housing for people who are in workforce, that are in like the 80% of median to 100% of median range, and our need to get money for low-income housing, where we can use that money that we get from the incentive zoning program to match city low-income dollars as well as federal tax credits in order to be able to construct low-income housing. When you do that, you can use $80,000 worth of money from the incentive zoning program to create a unit of housing, as compared to having 1 unit of housing created for 80%, where the entire amount of the incentive zoning has to go to create that unit of housing. So that's kind of a complicated structure that we have to deal with. From an incentive zoning program perspective, we are going to be, we have a committee that the mayor has created, and it's going to be reviewing all of our affordable housing programs. I think that's the only way in which we can operate. We need to be able to provide both. We need to be able to support both low-income housing and housing for workforce. But beyond that, the most important thing we can do in order to make sure that we actually have the housing for all of the people in the city that we need is to make sure that we actually have more housing. And one of the things that I've been working on is to try and get other kinds of alternatives available for people. A good example of that is micro-units. Micro-units, some controversy about them, but the fact is that they are affordable and they are produced by the private sector. There's no necessity for public incentives. 2,000 units in the last 2 years. That's pretty extraordinary. And they're renting in areas like $600 to $700 a month. So they're affordable to people who are relatively modest levels of income. So I want to make sure that that happens. I want to make sure that we continue to look at other alternatives that are going to produce more housing, and then use the incentive zoning program as one part of our kit of tools and not rely on the entire thing.
Jack, number 2.
In your view, what is the city's role in assuring equal education and achievement opportunity in Seattle public schools?
Well, as we all know, we don't run the schools, and I don't think we should. So we'll start with that. But the fact is that we have several things that we can do in order to be able to support the schools. We can create the kind of penumbra of services around the school district that actually make it more possible for students to achieve. The number one part of that is the Families in Education Levy. I was really proud that we doubled the size of the Families in Education Levy, and we're doing it much more on an evidence-based strategy rather than having the same program in every school. So that's a really important part of the package of programs that we can do. We also have some other things we do to support the schools. We have arrangement for sharing athletic fields where we share some of the maintenance on fields, and we put the schools on that. And we are also created in the last two budgets, we created a program for getting people started. It's for newborns and infants in order to provide them with well-child visits. Very well-established model, something that used to be done in this country, but it went out of fashion in the 70s and 80s. We realized that it needed to be recovered, and we recovered it and actually fully funded it so that every child is going to be able to get it who is in low and moderate income categories in the city. So that is the kind of preparation that's really important for kids to be able to have when they go to school. And then beyond that, we have support at the, and I support at the high school level, middle school and high school level, providing the kinds of youth employment programs, the Youth Violence Initiative. We've been doing a lot of work to make sure that that is effective and that actually provides services for people, and providing those kinds of out-of-school support that complement the things that we're able to do in the schools with the Families Education Program, like the school health programs, that sort of thing. And I can't get away without mentioning safe routes to school, which is a really important part of what we do, and that is promoting walking and bicycling for kids to get to school for good health and for better transportation alternatives. And I was going to mention food too, but I'll have to pass on that.
Voters passed the Parks and Green Spaces Levy in 2008, yet we've experienced cutbacks in staffing and facilities since then. When the levy is up for renewal next year, how can it be constructed to assure voters that their tax dollars will be allocated wisely?
Okay. So when we put the levy in place, I'll tell you the story of what happened. We were really afraid of what was going to happen because at the time the mayor opposed the levy, and Councilmembers Burgess, Rasmussen, and I were putting it together. We were trying to figure out, can we actually get something on the ballot and pass without the mayor's support? It had never happened in Seattle. So when we talked to the Seattle Times and they said, oh, we don't like operations and maintenance in the levies, we want it for capital, we thought we better just go for capital. So that's the reason there's no operations and maintenance in the levy, because we really thought that might sink us. After the recession, well, first of all, we were successful, as you know, in getting passed despite that. But when the recession hit, the budget took a hit, and the city wound up cutting mainly parks and libraries were the two departments that suffered the most. We preserved all of public safety, and I'm very proud to say that when I was council president, we preserved every single human services program and expanded our human services programs in the city. But it meant that parks suffered, and libraries. So last year, actually it took me about 2 years to put together a package that we were able to put to the voters last year to restore library services and expand them. And the voters approved that, and we now will have library services that are actually better than what we had before the recession. The next stage is to do that with parks. And that's what the 2014 Parks Levy, I believe, should focus on. It should focus on restoring the operations and maintenance in parks, and expanding it and bringing it back to a level that perhaps we haven't even had when we had the flush times. So that should be the main focus. I do think we should have some capital elements in it. There's a lot of things, there are areas of the city that still are underserved with parks, and there are particular kinds of facilities that we still need more of. Athletic fields, off-leash areas, community gardens, some of those things where we need some more capital acquisitions. But primarily 2014 should be our opportunity to restore operations and maintenance in parks.
John,
Number four, there will likely be two types of election reform on the ballot this fall: district elections and public financing of campaigns. Do you support either or both of these, and why?
Okay. I support public financing of campaigns. I do not, I think that there's a little bit more hype about it than we're actually going to see as reality. I don't think public financing dramatically changes the landscape of campaigns, but what it does do is encourage candidates to go out and really get small contributions and bring more people into the political process. And that, to me, is the key to actually making participation more viable. So I really support public financing for that purpose, and I think it's a really important step for us to take. I do not personally think that district elections are necessary or useful in the city. I think that I don't see why people would want to give up their opportunity to vote for all 9 council members and only be able to vote for 3. And I think all of the arguments that I've seen for it, they don't make much sense. There's more competition for city council than for the things that we elect by districts, our county councils and our legislative districts. In fact, most of our legislators don't even get challenged in their elections. And not that they're not great people, but nonetheless, I don't see any evidence that districts actually would produce competition. Nor do I see evidence that it would reduce the cost of elections. District elections can be just as expensive. If you look at the last election for county council that was competed over on the east side, I think they spent almost $1 million on that election. So I just haven't seen the argument that really makes sense to me on district elections. And the last thing I hear is people say, well, if you have a district election, you'd have 1 person who's accountable to you. Right now you've got 9 people who are accountable to you. And yeah, they're not going to agree with you all the time. But every one of them has to come back to you and ask for your vote. If you have just 1 person standing up there, it's going to be easy to get rolled. And what if that 1 person is somebody that you happen to support? Then you don't have anybody standing up for you. So for those reasons, I don't support it.
Dan, number 5.
Sure. What are your specific recommendations for selecting our new police chief and restoring public confidence in our police department? Very good question.
Okay. How many hours do I have? Okay. So public safety is the most important thing that the city can do. It's the basis for all the other things that we're able to accomplish. And what I feel that has happened over the last few years is public safety has been allowed to kind of drift. Every once in a while people focus on it and then they take the focus away. We need to have a really concentrated and thorough focus on public safety and say we're not going to rely simply on what it is that we've always done, but really to be innovative and rely on what really is fact-based results, getting that from the police department. When we select a new chief, that chief should be somebody who is able to do the combination of things that I think our current leadership does not do. Our current leadership is really nice. They're really Seattle nice. They're great people. I really like them. But what I've seen in evidence on the street is the police, the patrol, do not get enough supervision. And so you get somebody out on the street who's been in the force for a year or so, and then suddenly they're confronted with a crisis situation, and they don't have the training or the direct supervision to help them respond to that without, in some cases, panicking and doing things that are really bad. And that's my diagnosis of what a lot of the problem has been. And I think that fits with what the Department of Justice said when they recommended that we expand the number of sergeants who would give more supervision to the police department. Because that is where I think we have fallen short. It is that we are not providing the right kind of management. We're, instead of basically directing people and supporting them and monitoring them constantly, the reaction, I think, at the upper level of management has been more hands-off than I would like to see. So that's the strategy that I think we should be adopting to make the police department work most effectively, relying on facts and on evidence and on innovation, and then providing more decisive and firm management at the base level. And then the police chief has to be somebody who has a track record of being able to do both of those things. And we should select that chief through the process that we normally do. We interview, we select, we bring a bunch of people in, and we have a community process and a city process that everybody participates in.
Great. So now we'll open it up to follow-up questions. People can ask whatever they want. 1-minute answers to these. I have one, and then I saw Renee, and then Elizabeth. So one general criticism of the council as a whole, I think it's more style over substance, is that things sort of move cautiously. Everyone sort of says, oh, it's a great idea, but the devil's in the details, we need to study it again, or push it to next year. And there may be a couple exceptions. I hear Lacott and O'Brien, maybe Harold, but the other 6, I sort of hear, like, oh, it's very cautious and they move as a group. I guess number 1, is that a fair assessment? And number 2, if so, is that a good thing or is it a fair criticism?
I don't think it's a fair assessment.
Okay.
I think that everybody on the council takes some initiative on some things. Some things take way longer than I would like. I guess if I were going to, I would probably share the criticism that sometimes we process things to death. I think we also sometimes come right up to the brink of making a really good decision, and then everybody sort of says, oh, I'm tired of the details, and then we just fold. And I think a good example of that was the arena decision. I voted against the arena, and I voted against it because I felt that we were committing city tax dollars in a way that I didn't think was appropriate. But I think we went through a pretty good process getting close to the end, and then suddenly at the end everybody sort of threw up their hands and said, well, I guess it's the best we can get, instead of really honing in on the details. So that to me has been the big problem with the council. And I'm willing to vote no when something like that happens. When we have something that comes up, and I'm not willing to just go along to get along. I'm willing to say, no, I don't think this is the right solution, and I think maybe more council members should do that.
Okay, thank you. So Renee and then Elizabeth.
So I'm also volunteer leadership for Green Aurora Involved Neighbors, and many of us are on the corridor.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious about what happened with and what could be potential for the Aurora Improvement Plan, 85th to 145th. Why can't we look like shoreline? Good.
Okay, so I'm going to give you the not very politically good answer, and the answer is the Aurora Merchants Association resists over and over and over again. They've come to the table and they have used whatever means they can, whether it's legal or political, to try and prevent us from implementing that project. And they haven't done that when we went through the neighborhood planning process. They got neighborhood plans in that area to take their main streets off of Aurora. And so that's where we have Linden as the main street up in Broadview, and that's where we have the street to, I can't remember what street is, the street to the east as the main street in the Aurora neighborhood plan. So they've been the ones who have been resisting, and the city just has not really had the, I don't know if it's gumption or commitment to really willing to make that to say we're going to actually do this in spite of what's happening there.
Okay, Elizabeth?
So, what ideas do you have to, well, my feeling is the density, I'm all for density, but the way that it's happening is that you've got these humongous buildings right up against the sidewalk, they're soulless, they're ugly, and you know, Ballard, Seattle, I mean, South Lake Union, it just feels like a concrete jungle is being created. What ideas do you have for creating, including more trees clean the air, you know, provide habitat, even food. So what are your ideas for mandating somehow that new construction includes trees and greenery and things like that?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually trees is one of the issues that I'm focusing on over the next year. And one of the things that I like to do is to take a particular big issue area and really spend some time focusing on it until I come up with a comprehensive strategy. That's why I developed a zero waste strategy to deal with recycling and solid waste, the local food action initiative to deal with food, and now I'm doing the same thing with trees. So we've got 3 sets of policies that we're working on. Number 1, we just approved a week ago, and that is a new street tree ordinance that basically delineates who has responsibility for maintaining street trees and when street trees get put in and how to deal with them when they have problems. The second one is going to be the renewal of the city's urban forest management plan, which we're going to rename the urban forestry stewardship plan. And what I'm trying to do is to really focus on, we have to put resources into this. We can't just say trees are nice and everybody should take care of them. We have to actually put resources. Last year I got $1 million to be added to the Green Seattle Partnership to take care of our trees in the parks. And then finally, the third one will be, the planning and land use. Under planning and land use, we will have an ordinance that will cover trees on private property. And we'll set up a series of protections and replacement strategies for trees on private property, integrating that with the Seattle Green Factor, which is how we evaluate developments, and we need to make sure that that's actually working. So I want to take that large, comprehensive vision. Unfortunately, I have a lot more to say about it, but that's as far as I can say.
Okay, so Jack, and then probably time for one more Clayton. So Jack.
What is your opinion about how the city should go about addressing the police surveillance cameras on every corner?
I hope we don't have police surveillance cameras in every corner. I don't think that would be a good idea.
Oh, they're installed. Downtown, Pioneer Square through Belltown, all the way up to...
Are you talking about the red light cameras or about the...
No, these are Seattle Police Department cameras that were acquired through a Homeland Security grant.
Okay, but they're not activated at this point?
Well, that's what the mayor's office is telling the city that they're not activated because the public found out about it and wanted a vetting of the surveillance network.
Well, yeah, no, I think we should not be accepting those kinds of things if we don't have a policy in place for when they're going to be used and when they're actually going to be something that is done with respect for people's constitutional rights. I do think the red light cameras have actually been an extremely effective way of dealing with traffic issues, although sadly, we're still finding people keep violating. On the other hand, that brings us revenue, and at least it gets people's attention to the fact that they shouldn't be running those red lights and they shouldn't be running those school zones. But we put those in place and we have a protocol around it. And we told people about it and everybody knows what they are, where they are, and what their target is. That's the only way we should be doing surveillance.
Okay, last question, please.
This is a follow-up on Elizabeth's question. And also a conjoining of Elizabeth's question with the matter of low-income housing. There are very few firms that do any building type in the city. So when we have a multifamily boom, the buildings are done by a handful of firms. And they're very formulaic because that's the way the code works. And the result is a kind of mediocrity that increasingly squeezes people. The rooms get smaller, the floors get lower and lower. And life becomes cheaper, and ditto in spades for the latest low-income housing effort. There's something pathetic when it's regarded as innovative to take kitchens out of apartment units. So my question is, what can the city do to encourage innovation in architecture? Because it's really an architectural kind of problem.
I think we got the questions. So.
All right,
go.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Blasted on water.
That's right. Okay. So what I'm hearing is two questions, really. And one question is about the low-income housing program. And it's really important to specify that there is no one solution to low-income housing. Micro units are appropriate for some people. They don't work at all for families. They don't work for other people. So that's one part of the answer. The other answer you have is with innovation in terms of architecture and design. We used to have a city architect. And the city architect was one way in which we actually tried to pioneer doing some of those things. Yes, and we lost the city architect, and that position was ended, I believe, at I think at the first part of the Nichols administration, and that was a mistake. I think we don't provide the same kind of guidance. I think the design review boards need to be strengthened, and they need to have more ability to actually have design as a focus. They tend to get lost sometimes right now in the exceptions that they're required to review, and instead of being able to focus really in on the design. And we need to strengthen our city's design guidelines. I have legislation that actually would consolidate them and bring them into a single force so that people can actually look at them and see them more coherently. And then the next step is to go out to neighborhoods and say, what in your neighborhood would strengthen this for your neighborhood's design requirements? So that's a part of the neighborhood planning process, which I'm also really want to make sure we revitalize. And I actually got legislation through that will double the number of neighborhood plan updates starting next year. So that's a short answer to, again, I have so much more I can say. Yeah.
So we're out of time, so yeah. 30-second closing statement.
Okay, well, thanks. There is so many topics and so many issues to cover. We haven't really talked about transportation at all, for example. But one of the things that to me is really important is that I try to take a big picture view and look at things and work on things in terms of social justice, economics, stewardship, environmental protection, and community as the criteria that I use for judging things. I'm very proud in the last month that I got a couple of awards. The Sustainable Path Foundation named me as a Sustainable Pathfinder for the work I've been doing on the council over the last 15 years. And I also was awarded Hunger Fighter of the Year by the Food Lifeline for the work that I've been doing to improve food access for low-income people and to make sure that there's more healthy and nutritious food in people's hands. You've got to do both of those things. You've got to do social justice, and you've got to do all the other things we need to do for city, and I want to continue doing it. I really value your support.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.